Countless times, Liam Hayes had imagined a moment alone with Caleb Thorne, but never like this. Caleb was leaning against the headboard, a deep furrow in his brow, his eyes shut tight. His breath came in ragged bursts, and one of his hands was clamped around Liam's wrist. Just half an hour ago, Liam had been across the glittering ballroom, stealing glances at him through the shifting crowd, pretending it was accidental. A trip to the restroom had changed everything. A hand had shot out from a stall, pulling him into the shadows, another clamping over his mouth to stifle his gasp. Caleb's voice, rough and urgent, had been a whisper against his ear, pleading to be taken away. The unnatural heat radiating from him and the scent of distress made the situation terrifyingly clear. Caleb had been drugged. Fortunately, Liam had a habit of booking a room at the hotel for any large event. The journey from the ballroom to the room was a blur, Liam half supporting Caleb's dead weight. Now, with Caleb's reaction to the drug intensifying, Liam faced a stark choice. He could call one of Caleb's trusted friends, people who could get him to the best hospital, maybe even find him a compatible Omega to help him through this. Or he could be the one to help. For a moment, he hesitated. It felt like steering a ship carefully across a vast ocean, only to veer off course at the very last second. A mix of guilt and selfish devotion washed over him as he moved over Caleb, guiding the man's hand to his own waist. Just this once. It would be his secret, his one indulgence. The touch seemed to awaken something primal in Caleb. His powerful arms wrapped around Liam, pulling him down with an instinctual force. There was no gentleness, no prelude. The room filled with a heavy heat, punctuated by the soft, broken sounds that followed. Liam kept his eyes averted, unable to look at Caleb, terrified he would see the reflection of his own transgression. He kept his back to him as much as possible, allowing his own expression of raw pleasure to remain unseen. This continued deep into the night. Afterward, as Caleb slept, Liam lay awake, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. He didn't sleep at all. As the first light of dawn cracked the horizon, he slipped out of the bed, his body aching, and left the room without a sound. He knew that after this, he could never face Caleb Thorne with a clear conscience again. He slept through the day at his own apartment, only to be jolted awake by the insistent ringing of his phone. Chloe's voice crackled through the line, a frantic reminder of their appointment at Thorne Consolidated. His mind, still foggy, slowly pieced things together. He told her he was on his way. A year after returning to the States, Liam had opened a boutique perfumery, the Rain Studio, which had garnered a modest but respectable reputation. It was a stroke of luck that Thorne Consolidated, the corporate giant, was launching a new line of fragrances, and their product development team had taken an interest in one of his creations. Today was the final selection. Before last night, he would have been ecstatic. Now, a cold knot of dread sat in his stomach. Caleb Thorne was the CEO of Thorne Consolidated. If he remembered the beta who had climbed into his bed, there would be consequences. He met Chloe outside the monolith of steel and glass at 3 o'clock sharp. She commented on how terrible he looked, asking if he'd slept. He brushed it off and they went inside. The meeting with the product team went surprisingly well. They were impressed with the samples, and everything seemed set for signing the contracts in 3 days. As they left the skyscraper, Liam let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Chloe slung an arm over his shoulder, suggesting they celebrate with a drink. He agreed, his mood lifting slightly. He reached for his car keys, but his pocket was empty. He must have left them in the reception lounge. He told Chloe to wait by the car. Back in the lounge, he quickly retrieved the keys. As he turned to leave, he heard the distinct sound of footsteps approaching. A sense of foreboding washed over him. He looked up, his heart sinking. It was Caleb, flanked by a group of senior executives. Liam froze, unsure of what to do. The product manager, thankfully, recognized him and stepped forward, breaking the tense silence with introductions. Liam forced a tight, unnatural smile, his eyes darting toward the man at the center of the group. Caleb stood opposite him, his imposing frame perfectly fitted in a bespoke suit, his expression placid and remote. After the manager finished, Caleb gave a slight, dismissive nod. He said nothing more. His gaze swept past Liam as if he were a complete stranger. The dull ache of disappointment that settled in Liam's chest on the way out was something he told himself he had no right to feel. Caleb had been delirious. It was natural he wouldn't recognize him. In fact, Caleb probably didn't even know who he was before any of this. A greedy opportunist who got away clean had no right to feel let down. That evening, Chloe dragged him to a sleek, crowded bar in the city center. She leaned in, whispering about how it was the best place to find handsome alphas and beautiful omegas. He reminded her to be careful and check her scent-blocking patch. She laughed it off, promising to show him a good time, but within half an hour, she was swept away by a striking alpha in a red jacket. Liam smiled to himself and found a quiet corner with a glass of juice. He had barely finished his drink when a man, reeking of cheap whiskey, sidled up to him with a familiar predatory line. Liam stood to leave, politely declining, but the man grew aggressive, sneering that a beta should be grateful for the attention. As the man reached for him, a hand shot out and stopped him. Before Liam could process what was happening, two men in dark suits had materialized, efficiently escorting the drunkard away. Another bodyguard approached Liam and handed him a business card. He informed Liam that Mr. Thorne had instructed him to say their collaboration required further discussion, and that Liam should await contact. Then he melted back into the crowd. Liam stared at the card. He scanned the room, but Caleb was nowhere to be seen. Still, he felt a certainty that he was there, watching. The deal had been all but sealed. Why this sudden need for more discussion? A chilling thought struck him. Caleb knew. He had recognized him and didn't want to do business with a beta who took advantage of people. After a hurried text to Chloe, Liam stood under a streetlight, the blue business card clutched in his hand, replaying the bodyguard's words. The fate of his studio was on the line. After several minutes of tortured indecision, he dialed the number on the card. It was answered almost immediately, but Liam found himself speechless. A deep, magnetic voice on the other end said, "Hello?" The sound sent a jolt through his entire nervous system. He managed to introduce himself as the owner of the Rain Studio and mention their collaboration. His voice strained. There was a pause on the other end before Caleb's voice came through again, cool and decisive, telling him he would be at his studio tomorrow at 3. The line went dead. Liam's hand, slick with sweat, was still clutching the phone. Caleb Thorne was coming to his studio. When he finally looked up, he realized he was standing right in front of it. The words "The Rain Studio" on the soft blue sign seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The sight pulled him back 10 years, to a rainy day when he had first seen Caleb Thorne. His stepbrother had been tormenting him, and his father had done nothing. With only $200 in his pocket, he had wandered through the wet streets to his mother's grave. He had spoken to her, crying, asking why she had left him. A voice from behind him had cut through his sobs, calling him useless. He turned to see a boy in a baseball cap who had clearly been listening for some time. As Liam wiped his tears, ready to argue, the boy spoke again, saying that crying would only upset his mother and disturb his own. Liam had followed the boy's gaze to the adjacent headstone. The picture was of a gentle, beautiful woman, much like his own mother. He watched in silence as the boy meticulously cleaned the area, placed a small, perfect cake, and a single blue flower by the grave. As the rain started again, a pair of black sneakers appeared in his vision. The boy held out an umbrella, telling him that if he was being bullied, he should fight back. Liam had taken the umbrella and watched, stunned, as he walked away. The next time he saw him was 3 years later on the first day of college. Liam recognized him instantly among the alphas. He was taller, broader, but it was him. A classmate told him his name, Caleb Thorne. Looking at him, Liam's heart had hammered in his chest. He thought he might be falling for him, or maybe he already had. Caleb never seemed to recognize him, or perhaps he had simply forgotten the crying boy from the cemetery. To learn more about him, Liam had discreetly observed him. Caleb's routine was rigid, a predictable path between the library and the Thorne Consolidated building. He rejected all advances from Omegas and kept only a couple of close friends. Liam knew Caleb was destined for greatness, and he resolved to become worthy, throwing himself into his perfumery studies. He later heard the rumors that Caleb's mother had him out of wedlock, and his father had married a businessman's daughter instead, making Caleb the illegitimate son. He remembered the woman in the photograph and finally understood the words Caleb had spoken to him at the cemetery. The next day, Caleb arrived at the studio alone, his driver having taken the rest of Liam's staff for afternoon tea at a nearby cafe. The car door opened, and Caleb's eyes met his. For a second, Liam's legs felt weak. He led him into the showroom. Caleb moved through the space with a deliberate grace, his fingers brushing over the sample bottles. Every one of those bottles held a piece of Liam's heart. His fantasies of love poured into each scent. Caleb picked one up, remarking that it wasn't bad. He then turned to Liam, his gaze intense, and said that while he had reviewed the studio's portfolio, he needed to observe the product quality firsthand. Since Liam had made most of them, he would have to be the one to demonstrate. Caleb placed the bottle in Liam's hand and sat on the sofa, watching him. "Spray it," he commanded. Liam hesitated. Felt like a deliberate taunt. But Caleb didn't seem like that kind of person. He looked at the bottle, a bamboo scent, and spritzed it twice on his neck and wrists. Caleb simply said it wasn't enough. Liam sprayed more. "Still not enough," Caleb said. He couldn't smell it. He stood up, took the bottle, and held it above Liam, his eyes hooded. "It needs more," he murmured, the bamboo-scented mist settling over Liam, whose heart was about to burst. The taut fabric of Caleb's shirt brought back vivid flashes of the hotel room, of Liam's fingers unbuttoning that same shirt. The thought made him shove Caleb away, stumbling backward. He began to stammer about the all-natural ingredients, asking if Mr. Thorne had any critiques. A flicker of annoyance crossed Caleb's face. Just as Liam was about to apologize, a knock on the door announced Chloe's return. She pulled Liam aside, whispering to ask if anything strange had happened. Liam quickly reassured her, but when he turned back, Caleb was already leaving. His driver relayed a message that Mr. Thorne would give a definitive answer the next day. Liam watched him go, certain that he had made Caleb angry. That night, Liam was contemplating whether to call and explain when a knock sounded at his door. He opened it to find Caleb Thorne standing there. He was momentarily stunned, wondering how he knew his address. 1,000 questions flooded his mind, but he stepped aside and let him in. Caleb's custom leather shoes made a dull sound on the hardwood floor. Liam asked what he was doing there. Caleb's eyes fixed on the collar of his bathrobe as he said he was there to collect a debt from a coward who wouldn't admit their wrongdoing. So he did know. The studio visit had just been a pretense to confirm it was him. Liam's hands clenched at his sides. He looked up at Caleb and admitted it was his fault, but insisted he wasn't trying to gain anything from it. He was a beta. He wouldn't demand responsibility. He lowered his head, awaiting judgment. He had acted on a selfish desire, and he didn't regret it. He had spent one night with the man he had loved for 7 years. Caleb's voice was a low growl. "So you think your mistake was sleeping with me?" The last 2 words were bitten off with sharp derision. Liam looked up, confused, but a shadow fell over him as Caleb pressed him back against the sofa. A wave of heat rolled off him, and the scent of an alpha in distress filled the air. He was in his rut. Liam, a beta who had barely paid attention in biology class, knew nothing about suppressants. He fumbled, saying he would call his driver. As he scrambled for Caleb's phone, his hand brushed against Caleb's neck. The skin was burning. Caleb grunted that the suppressants weren't there. They were in his jacket pocket. Liam practically crawled to the coat rack by the door, his face flushed. He found the phone and called the driver, his fingers trembling. The driver promised to be there right away. As he hung up, a wave of relief washed over him. He turned to tell Caleb, but was suddenly pinned against the cool wall, Caleb's mouth crashing down on his. His mind went blank. He could feel the desperate need radiating from Caleb. When a hand slid under his robe, caressing his lower back, he knew he should stop it, but he couldn't bring himself to refuse Caleb anything. Just as he was about to surrender completely, a sharp knock came from the door, followed by the driver's anxious voice announcing that the doctor was ready. The sound was like a splash of cold water. He tried to push Caleb away, but his grip only tightened. Caleb was lost to his instincts. A beta could offer no real relief to an alpha in a rut. A surge of panic gave him strength. He bit down hard on Caleb's lip. The taste of blood filled his mouth. Caleb recoiled in pain, his eyes clearing for a fraction of a second. He stood there, breathing heavily, his fists clenched, before turning and storming out of the apartment. The door slammed shut, and silence returned. Liam slowly pulled his robe together and stood motionless for a long time. He couldn't sleep. He called his best friend, Jesse, who was living abroad. He rambled, asking if Jesse remembered the guy he'd drunkenly confessed his feelings for just before he left the country. He told him that person had kissed him tonight, though it was only because of his rut. Jesse was confused. He didn't remember any confession. He said he'd been called away early that night, but before he left, he'd brought a handsome guy in a slate blue shirt over to keep Liam company. The world seemed to stop. Liam remembered every detail related to Caleb. The slate blue shirt. That had been Caleb's shirt at the graduation gala. The night he'd gotten his diploma. The night that marked the end of his 4th year of secretly loving Caleb Thorne. He remembered Caleb on stage, poised and confident, and the Omegas in the crowd sighing over him. Liam had believed he could never have him. He was leaving for 2 years abroad the next day, and the thought of a long-distance crush was daunting. He drank heavily that night, glass after empty glass. He vaguely remembered Jesse leaving to take a call. Then the sofa beside him dipped. Believing it was Jesse, Liam had poured out 4 years of secret adoration. He'd confessed how he had chosen his career in perfumery just to feel closer to Caleb's world of business. How his feelings had deepened from a crush into love. He had wondered aloud if Caleb could ever like him back. When he woke up later, a single white rose was resting on his hand. In the language of flowers, a white rose meant "I am worthy of you." He had thought it was Jesse's way of encouraging him. Now he knew. It had been Caleb's response. From Caleb's perspective, The person who had just confessed their love for him had vanished the very next day, without a word, for 2 years. His anger wasn't about the hotel room. It was about Liam's silence, his reappearance as a stranger, his running away all over again. His careful, cautious approach had been a blatant rejection in Caleb's eyes. A wave of regret and longing washed over him. He had to see him, had to explain. He paced his apartment, phone in hand, but couldn't bring himself to call. Caleb was likely getting medical help for his rut. He shouldn't be disturbed. Tomorrow. He would see him tomorrow. The next morning, determined to find Caleb, he was stopped by the sight in his peephole. His stepbrother, Sean, stood there, a malicious grin on his face. He was there to take Liam home, saying his hard times were over. The sight of him made Liam's skin crawl. If it weren't for the inheritance his mother had left him, he would never have finished his studies. His father had cut him off years ago for refusing an arranged marriage. Sean threatened his studio and his friends, his twisted expression revealing the pleasure he took in having leverage. Liam knew there was no limit to his cruelty. He opened the door. The car ride was silent. The house held only a few good memories with his mother. His father was sitting in the living room, and without preamble, told Liam he was to start at the family company tomorrow to help his brother. The hypocrisy was astounding. Liam said he was tired and went upstairs, ignoring his father's enraged shouts. That night, Sean crept into his room and attacked him. Fear and disgust surged through Liam as Sean's hands closed around his neck. But then he remembered Caleb's words from so many years ago. Fight back. He feigned submission, and as Sean's grip loosened, Liam grabbed a heavy glass cup from the nightstand and smashed it against his stepbrother's head. Sean screamed in pain. Liam grabbed the file folder from under his pillow and ran. He ran barefoot, the sound of his own ragged breathing filling his ears, until the sharp pain of the pavement forced him to stop. It was past midnight when he finally made it back to his building. As the elevator ascended, all he wanted was to see Caleb. He wanted to tell him he wasn't weak anymore, that he had fought back. When the doors opened, his wish was granted. A tall silhouette was standing in the dim light of the hallway. The figure turned at the sound, and Liam's tense heart finally let go. He ran forward and crashed into him, his lips finding Caleb's in a desperate, frantic kiss. Caleb's arms, stiff for a moment, wrapped around him, pulling him close. They stumbled through the door, their bodies tangled together, and fell onto the bed. This time, Liam looked straight into Caleb's eyes. Caleb's voice was rough when he asked why he hadn't answered his phone. Liam explained it was broken. Caleb propped himself up, his gaze unwavering, and asked if he would run again after this. Liam pushed himself up to meet him, promising he never would. Good, Caleb murmured, his shadow falling over Liam. Because you can't. As dawn broke, Liam was exhausted. He pleaded that he needed rest, but Caleb just held him tighter, whispering he would keep him warm. When Liam finally awoke again, it was dark outside. Caleb was kneeling on the rug beside the bed, a first aid kit open, carefully tending to the cuts on his feet. He told Liam he hadn't noticed the injuries in the dark, and asked why he hadn't said anything. Liam mumbled that he hadn't wanted to interrupt. He buried his face in the covers, embarrassed, but peeked out to watch Caleb. There was something unexpectedly charming about seeing such a powerful alpha perform such a delicate task. After Caleb finished, he sat on the bed and told Liam to explain everything. And so Liam did. He told him everything, from his childhood to the events of the last few days, holding nothing back. When he was done, he asked Caleb when he had started to like him. Caleb's hand gently held his ankle. His voice was low and soft. He said his mother had told him to never let the person he loves suffer even the slightest bit of hurt. He explained that by his senior year of college, he had secured his position at Thorne Consolidated and was no longer just the illegitimate son. He had the white rose ready at the graduation gala, prepared to make his move, but then he heard Liam's raw, unexpected confession of love. A warm feeling spread from Liam's ankle through his entire body. He burrowed into Caleb's arms, holding him tight. Caleb had fought his way out of the darkness and was coming toward him with a bouquet of flowers, while Liam had been too cautious to ever truly understand him. They had missed their chance once, but it didn't matter anymore. They had the future. 3 days later, still sore, Liam finally convinced Caleb to go back to work. Before he left, Caleb asked if he needed help with his family situation. Liam smiled, saying he could handle it himself, just as Caleb had taught him. After Caleb left, Liam looked at the file folder on his desk. It contained evidence that his father had coerced his dying mother into signing over her shares in the company by threatening Liam's safety. He took all of it to the authorities. His father and stepbrother were arrested. A few weeks later, the Rain Studio and Thorne Consolidated officially signed their collaboration. At the celebration party, a very drunk Chloe threw her arms around Liam, gushing about how he was the most amazing beta she knew and how she couldn't believe he'd let that Ice King Caleb Thorne snatch him up. Liam, slightly tipsy himself, laughed and returned the compliment. As they were talking, Chloe suddenly sobered up, yelped, and fled to the restroom. Liam turned and saw Caleb's reflection in the window behind him. Caleb was just watching him, but Liam knew that look. He was in trouble. He quickly straightened his clothes and went to Caleb, suggesting they go home. Caleb agreed, nodding to the remaining guests and wrapping an arm around Liam's waist. At home, long after midnight, Caleb was still in his study. Liam went to tell him to come to bed, but as he neared the room, he smelled a familiar fragrance. He pushed the door open. Caleb wasn't there, but on the desk was a new bottle of perfume he'd been working on. As he reached for it, the study door clicked shut behind him. Caleb's voice came from the darkness. Liam's hand flinched, spilling a few drops of perfume on his fingers. The door was locked. He was thrown onto the leather sofa, and the entire bottle of perfume was poured over his chest. Caleb's voice was a low rumble against his skin. "I don't like the scent of outsiders in my home." It took Liam a moment to realize he was talking about Chloe. By the time the third bottle of perfume was empty, Liam was begging for mercy from the bathtub. He had been washed 3 times with 3 different scents. Caleb simply told him there were many more in the study that he had personally selected. Liam sobbed that he was leaving him, that he should go find an Omega. Caleb just held him, his voice husky. "A beta is much better. I can make you smell like whatever I want." 3 months later, they were married. It was a small ceremony with close friends. Jessie flew in from overseas and cried through the entire thing. Chloe came with her boyfriend, the red-haired alpha from the bar, who turned out to be a famous actor they'd been secretly dating for years. Chloe was still visibly nervous around Caleb. Liam shot Caleb a look, remembering that night of perfume-fueled punishment, and kicked his shoe. Caleb simply smiled and pulled him closer. As Liam walked down the aisle holding a bouquet of white roses, it felt like he was walking down that rainy path from all those years ago. At the end of it stood the boy who had given him an umbrella. During the vows, Caleb looked at him and said, "Till death do us part." With tears in his eyes, Liam wrapped his arms around his husband's neck. "And never part till death. The year my mother died, I was taken to the Thorne house. My so-called father told me to be quiet and invisible. He had another son, 2 months younger than me. The news that I was illegitimate spread through my new school on the first day. After that, my life was a series of small tortures. Tacks in my shoes, rust in my pockets. But I was born in darkness. It didn't scare me. One day, I let his pet snake loose in his room. He wet the bed and the story was all over school. For a while, things were quiet. Then, a few months later, I came home to find my mother's portrait thrown in the mud in the yard. It was raining. I fought him right there, and didn't stop until his mother's screams brought people to pull us apart. My father slapped me. I said nothing, just picked up the soaked photograph and walked out. I didn't cry. I just felt a cold, hard hatred. I saw a cat shivering under a pavilion. I picked it up. It was so fragile, so easy to break. For a terrifying moment, I wanted to know what it felt like to be the one who inflicted pain. Just as my grip tightened, a bright voice called out, "Mommy, look at the kitten." I snapped back to myself, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. I put the cat down and hid. A boy holding a blue umbrella ran under the pavilion with his mother. He picked up the cat, smiling, completely unafraid as it smudged his clean white shirt. That smile was like a drop of pure water in my dark world. It stopped me from stepping into the abyss. Years later, I saw him again. He was crying in front of his mother's grave. I didn't want him to be so sad, so I spoke to him, clumsy and harsh. I gave him a blue umbrella. Liam asks me when I fell in love with him. I don't know the exact moment, but if I told him it started from the first time I saw him, I would have to reveal all my own darkness, the ugly thoughts I had that day. I never want him to know about that. Liam, I love you.